everyone, it's me, Andrea from Andy's Corner, and I'm so glad that you're joining me today for our next episode. Now, we are back in Genesis, and we're talking about Abram. And God had just promised him the land of Canaan, but there was a famine, and he had to go to Egypt. And then remember everything with the Pharaoh and his wife. Well, then he left Egypt. And that's where it leaves us today for chapter 13. It says, So Abram left Egypt and traveled north into the Negev, which is the desert, along with his wife and Lot and all they owned. Abram was very rich in livestock, silver, and gold. Now back then they didn't have cash like dollars, $100, $50. So whatever you owned was a reflection of your wealth. So if you owned a lot of cattle, a lot of donkeys, a lot of horses, camels, if you owned a lot of silver or gold, that showed that you were wealthy. Also, if you owned a lot of servants, and usually at this time, the servants wanted to work for their owners. So let's keep going. From the Negev, they continued traveling from stages toward Bethel. And they pitched their tents between Bethel and Ai, where they had camped before. Now remember, he stopped at Bethel before going to Egypt last time, and he built an altar for the Lord. And now he's back here again. So this was the same place where Abram had built the altar, and there he worshiped the Lord again. Lot, who was traveling with Abram, had also become very wealthy with flocks of sheep and goats and herds of cattle and many tents. But the land could not support both Abram and Lot, with all their flocks and herdsmen living so close together. So disputes broke out between the herdsmen of the tribes of Abram and Lot. At this time, also the Canaanites and Perizzites were also living in the land. So there's 4 different tribes, I'd say, living in this area with lots of animals. Finally, Abram said to Lot, hey, let's not allow this conflict to come between us or our herdsmen. After all, we are close relatives. Remember, Lot was his nephew. The whole countryside is open to you. Take your choice of any section of the land that you want, and we will separate. If you want the land to the left, I'll take the land on the right. If you prefer the land on the right, then I'll go to the left. Now, that is so nice of Abram. I'll get it eventually. Of Abram. Can you imagine? He must feel so confident in God's ability to provide for him that he's not worried of having the best land. I mean, he has probably hundreds of people to take care of and animals. You'd think that he'd want the greenest grass, with all the trees and the fruits and the vegetables growing so that he could provide for his family. But he's not concerned about that. He allows Lot, his nephew, to get the choicest land, and he knows God already promised me, so he's not worried about anything. That is so beautiful, and that's so true. When we know our inheritance in Christ, we don't have to be worried and striving for something great here that we take it from other people. No. Yes, we can strive to be great, obviously, but we don't need to be worried that what we end up with is less than anybody else's, because God will take care of us. Okay, verse 10. Lot took a long look at the fertile plains of the Jordan Valley in the direction of Zoar. The whole area was well watered everywhere, just like the garden of the Lord or the beautiful land of Egypt. Now remember, when they say garden of the Lord, they're talking about the Garden of Eden in Genesis chapter 1 or 2. And this was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, we'll get to that part. That comes a lot later. Lot chose for himself the whole Jordan Valley to the east of them. He went there with his flocks and servants and parted company with his uncle Abram. So Abram settled in the land of Canaan, And Lot moved his tents to a place near Sodom and settled among the cities of the plain. But the people of this area were extremely wicked and constantly sinned against the Lord. Now, that is kind of like a foreshadowing. So Lot moved to the beautiful, most beautiful place ever, but it was actually right next to the cities that were wicked and that were constantly coming against the Lord. Now, let's find out in the near future if those people will influence Lot, or will Lot have an influence on the cities next to him, Sodom and Gomorrah? I already know the answer. Maybe you know the answer. So then, after Lot had gone, the Lord spoke to Abram. Look as far as you can. See in every direction, north and south, east and west. I am giving you all this land, as far as you can see, to you and to your descendants, as a permanent possession. And I will give you so many descendants that the dust of the earth, like the dust of the earth, that they cannot be counted. Go, walk through the land in every direction, for I am giving it to you. So Abram moved his camp to Hebron and settled near the oak grove belonging to Mamre. There he built another altar to the Lord. So that's very interesting to me. Again, Abram didn't move until after God spoke to him. Do you do that? In your life, do you make decisions on your own without talking to the Lord and asking him his opinion? I know I struggle with that. So friends, let me remind you today, before you make any big life decisions or even small life decisions, go to the Lord. That is his desire for you, is to come to him. And I want to be like Abram again, in that Abram didn't move until God told him, this is your land, and then he moved. Can you imagine if we lived our life like that? That we say, okay, Lord, what do you have for me? And he says, this is what I have for you. Now move. How beautiful. We don't ever have to worry about what we're going to do in life because God will direct us. And even still, when Abram didn't know he was willing to move, he still allowed Lot to pick the best land first. How selfless and humble and secure in God was he that he allowed his family to go first. Man, we can learn a lot from Abram. But what did you learn from the Lord? What did you notice about the Lord? I noticed that God keeps his promises. Again, remember, he told him back in chapter 12, I will give you this land. And then he went to Egypt and he got kicked out of Egypt and he was traveling back. And then he gave him that land right there. And that's still not even the end. You'll see in the future that somehow the Israelites end up back in Egypt, but somehow they get back to this same exact land. God's promises still carry through generations. And he makes more promises to Abram that we can read about if God kept his promises. So he promised him descendants like the sand. That is so many people. That's so many descendants. So as we read through the Bible, we can see whether or not God kept his promise with Abram. So I don't know about you, but I learned a lot. So stay tuned for our next episode, which, is about Lot and his neighbors. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, Lot. All right. See you later. Bye.